They were on Metzia Daf Mem 40a, and then we begin at the Mishnah, about a quarter of the way down. Okay, so today we're going to deal with shrinkage. Somebody deposits some kind of produce with his friend. When you return it, you can deduct the shrinkage. So now we're going to see a lot of details about that. What is the shrinkage for wheat? And Orez we usually translate in modern Hebrew as rice, but it might also be, according to Rashi, it's millet, whatever that is. Tisha chatzai kavin likor, 9.5 kav from a core, so it's about 2.5%. Lisaorin ladochan for barley and dochan, which is some other kind of grain. Tisha kavin likor, 9 kav per core, which is a little bit. Let's see, it was for a whole. Let's see, Tisha Chasoika. So this is about twice as much, right? About 5%. Lakusmin lozera pishtan, spelt and flax shalosh sayin lakor, 3 sa'a per core, which is about 10%. Hakolafi hamido, hakolafi azman. Everything is proportional to the amount that you've given, so a percentage, and for how long it was deposited there for, because shrinkage increases over time. Rabbi Yochanan says, like, why would you adjust? He's assuming that the Mishnah means you adjust the percentage, right? If there's a larger amount, you take a larger percentage. Like, what do the mice care, right? Like, if there's more, there's less. Hello, close. They eat the same. If you have a huge pile of produce or a small pile of produce, the mice are going to eat the same amount. It shouldn't be a percentage. Ella and you only calculate the shrinkage on the first core. So we have these measurements: 2%, 5%, 10% of the first of one core. And then if there's 100 cores, so the other 99, there's no shrinkage, because he's assuming the shrinkage is constant regardless of how much stuff there is there, rather than a percentage of the whole. Rabbi Yehuda says, if there was a large pile, then there's no shrinkage, because it also expands. So the mice might eat something, but there's a certain amount of expansion in the pile. So little unclear what, like usually things dry out, but we could be talking about where you've deposited it there in the summer, and then in the rainy season, when there's more moisture in the air, it absorbs moisture and expands. So even though the mice ate some, that's made up for by how much expansion there was. Okay, so Gemara says Orez tuva chaser, but Gemara observes that Orez, which let's translate as rice, as Tosfos does. So isn't there more shrinkage than that by observation? Rabbi says, but Orez kolav shana. No, we're talking about hulled rice, right? If it's already hulled, then it doesn't shrink. It doesn't get as much shrinkage. Okay. Now the Mishnah said that spelt and flax, gimel lakur, we said about 10%. We're talking about unpeeled, or it's still in the husk. We have a brisa that supports that. The brisa says that specifically that this percentage applies to the whole rice, the whole grain, and not where it's already been well, I don't know if it's winnowing or however you remove the husk from the grain. So hakolafi amida, the Mishnah said everything goes according to the amount. Tana, and we have a brisa that explains that kain l'chol kor v'kor. In other words, no matter how much you have there, it's the same percentage for the whole pile. And for each year that it's there, right? So every year there's more shrinkage. which Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehuda disputed. So Rabbi Yochanan agree. Yeah, but you care if the shrinkage is due to the mice are going to eat the same amount. Doesn't matter how much is there. If there's a large amount, there would be a smaller percentage of shrinkage. Tanya, we have a brisa. Amrlo Rabbi Yochanan. They responded to Rabbi Yochanan. Harbe ovdos mehan. Harbe mispazros mehan. It's not just mice, right? There's other kinds of shrinkage that apply to the whole thing. It's not just the appetite of the mice. It's also the wind blows through, or people can can steal from it. I mean, you can imagine all kinds of other ways that something is depleted or that there's shrinkage. It's not just due to the mice. Tana. So we have another brisa commenting on this. This is, if I have a separate room where I keep your stuff, I could just say to you, here's your stuff. Like, I shouldn't have to calculate any shrinkage, right? If there was shrinkage, there was shrinkage. But this is the stuff you gave me, and here it is. But what if I mixed everything in together with my stuff, right? Like, I have 100 measures, and you give me 10 measures to look after. So now I have 110. Right? When you come back, I don't have to give you the full 10 measures. I give you the 10 less the percentage of shrinkage. But if there was a particular place where you stored this guy's stuff, here's your stuff. This is exactly what you gave me. Take whatever is still there. So Gemara says, like, why should it make a difference if you've mixed it with your own stuff? Like, you can measure the whole pile, right? Let's say you had 100 saw, and now you've added 10, and now there's, it's decreased by 10%. So then give him his stuff less 10%, right? Like, go by the shrinkage of the whole mixed pile. So Gemara says, stopping mehan. No, because you're using the stuff in the meantime, right? So it's not just sitting there and you can measure the shrinkage. You go and take some for your kitchen during the time that it's there. So you don't know how much exactly you took and how much was shrinkage. That's why you have to know the percentage of shrinkage. The last coming topic. So Gemara says, well, then why don't you just keep a log of how much you're taking out of there? The coming topic, you didn't keep a log. So if you don't know how much was shrinkage and how much was your own personal stuff that you took out, then that's why you need the Mishnah to give you these estimates. These standards. Rabbi Yehuda says that if it was a large pile, you don't deduct anything, because in addition to shrinkage, there's expansion and it balances out. What does he mean by a large quantity? 10 kur is large enough to come under Rabbi Yehuda's rule. And we have another brisa that also says the same thing. So Tani Kana Kamed Rab Nachman, the Tana said before of Nachman, Bamedvarim Amurim, when does the Mishnah apply Shemadad Lo Mitoch Garno? When you are measuring the stuff out in the granary, the Hester Lo Mitoch Garno, and return to him also from the granary. Of Amadad Lo Mitoch Garno, the Hester Lo Mitoch base. So, but what if the initial measure was done in the granary, and then when you return it, you do it from your house, right? Like, you've already taken everything home from the granary. And there's no depletion of day, because in your home, presumably in a smaller quantity, there is expansion, right? That balances the shrinkage. So Amarle, sort of Nachman said, "V'chi b'shuftane askinan." Are we dealing with idiots? Diave b'chayla of the shatle b'chayla. Like, are we talking, like, this is obvious what you're saying? Like, if you're the guy who deposits the stuff with you, he understands that he's done it in different places, so, and that the conditions are different. So the more answers, Dilma, maybe the brisa means be a most hagarin, not that you mentioned that in the granary, but in the granary season, right? So in other words, like we did see already, that when you measure it out originally in the dry, like in the dry season, when you take things to the granary, right? Things have grown in the dry season, you take them to the granary and then you put it in storage for the winter. the hechsher lo b'mos hagara, and so if you're returning it in the same season, fine. Avol lo b'mos hagara and the hechsher lo b'mos hagshani. But if you return it in a different season, the rainy season, then you don't you don't count shrinkage because the expansion balances the shrinkage because it absorbs the moisture from the rain, the humidity in the rainy season. So Rav Papa says in Cain, Livka Kada. If it's true that things expand in the rainy season, we should see the evidence that if you have a full barrel and you seal it, and then if it expands in the rainy season, it should burst the barrel, right? So what are you telling me that there's this expansion? It doesn't seem to be true. Gemara says, yeah, you know what? This has happened before. It does happen. Or you could say Mishum Itzitza, that in the barrel everything is kind of packed together. There's no it doesn't absorb moisture because there's no room for the moisture to get in, I guess. So that's why, even though in general the grain absorbs moisture and expands, but not if it's packed tightly in a barrel and sealed, then it doesn't. There's no moisture doesn't get. Next,
Is he allowed to? Is he allowed? Sorry, is he allowed to use the product? We were making a distinction between a decrease and versus what he uses in his own kitchen. Is he allowed to use the product that was lent to him? I thought he was supposed to watch it.
So if there's an understanding that you're going to give me your grain, and I say, okay, I'm going to store it with the rest of my stuff, and when you come back for it, I'm going to give you, I'll give you back grain from the general pile. So in other words, it's fungible. It's treated as fungible. I suppose that would have to be an agreement between the owner and the watchman, right? You probably just can't do that. Or it could be that there's an understanding that the grain is fungible. Well, that would be a little surprising though, because what if you say mine is high quality and yours isn't, or something like that. But either they agree to do so, or that's the standard.
And then he's not responsible. Second question, he's not responsible for the natural loss of the product, that the mice eat it or the wind blows it, that part he doesn't have to return?
Right.
So if the shrinkage is 20% or whatever it might be in that area, he's not liable to return. He's not chayav to return that.
Yeah. It seems fair, no? If there's really shrinkage, then why should I have to be responsible for it? It would shrink in your property as well.
All right.
Okay. Next Mishnah. Yosilo shtus liyain. What about liquids? So wine, you can take out a sixth. There's a sixth that evaporates or gets absorbed by the barrel, perhaps. Rabbi Hillel Omer, chomesh. It's not a sixth, but a fifth. Yosilo shlosha lugin shemen l'mein. What about oil? So 3%. Lugum echsa shmarim. 1.5 of that, or 1.5%, is like sediment, right? So when you pour it out, the sediment stays in the barrel. Lugum echsa bala, and the barrel absorbs some. Im hayashem mezukak, but if it was refined oil, and the shmar, then the 1.5% that you say is goes into the dregs, the leaves, whatever, then you don't deduct that 1.5% because it's already been refined. So there's no sediment. Im hayu kankani mishalim, and if it was you're using old barrels, so in other words they've already absorbed oil and they're not going to absorb more, and then you don't count those 1.5%. That you assume is being absorbed by the barrel. That only applies to new barrels. Rabbi Hillel Omer, even if you're selling refined oil to someone, so we're not talking about a shomer anymore, we're talking about a merchant. So I come and I buy from you, like a whole season's worth of oil, but I'm not going to store it in my house. I'm going to come back to you during the year and say, I need another 10 liters. Right. But you sold me 100 liters in the beginning. So then the merchant can deduct the amount that's assumed to be lost, so the amount of shrinkage. So what do you do? The buyer understands that instead of 100 since he's not taking delivery now, he's taking delivery over time. So over time, out of 100 liters, you're going to lose 3 liters. So even though you're buying 100 liters, you're only going to take home in the end 97 liters. Okay, well, and so the Gemara comments on the difference in the wine between the Tanakama, who says a sixth of shrinkage, and Rabbi Yehuda who says a fifth. They don't argue in principle. Marki Asrei, there are different conditions where they lived. Basrei the Mar Chafu B'Kira, below Ma'itz Tvei. In the Tanakama's location, they would like wax the barrel. They would coat the inside of the barrel so they wouldn't absorb so much. Now, Basra Damar, but Rabbi Yehuda's place, Chafu B'Kufra, they coated it with a different, not with wax, but with pitch. We might say that absorbs more, and that's why he has a larger measure of shrinkage. Or you could say Mishum Gargishta. It's the type of material that they use to make the barrels. The material that they had available in their different places, one was more absorbing than the other. But after Rabbi Yehuda, in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, and remember Rabbi Yehuda said you deduct 1/5 for wine. They put 48 kuz of some measure into a barrel. And then they would sell it for 6 zuz. Paris Rabbi Yehuda, so he would buy wholesale. Shisa bezuza. He would buy them for 1 zuz for 6 of these measures, 6 foods. Dal tlasin v'shisa b'shisa. So take like 1/6 of that out. So you're taking out 36. So there were 48 kuz altogether because you bought 6 times 6 kuz. So no, sorry,
36.
sold it for 6 times 6 kuz. So dal plus in v'shisa. So subtract the 36 from the total of 48. What was the total of 48? Just a second. He started 48. So you have 12 left over, right? He bought 48 kuz wholesale and he sold 36 retail. Pashale Tracer. So you've got 12 left. Daltamanya Shasuse. From those 12, take out 8 kuz, which you expect the shrinkage from 48. If you're going 1 out of 6, then there's 8 kuz that absorbed by the barrel. Pashuluhu arba. So there's still 4 kuz. That's his profit, right? In other words, he's made his money back after he sold 36, and he's still got 4 kuz left. Okay. So that seems reasonable, but Vaham or Shmuel Hamisaker Al Yisaker Yoser Shtus. So why didn't he take more profit? Like, why is he selling so cheap? The rule of the Gemara is that you could mark up a product up to 1/6. But in this case, he's only profiting 4 kuz out of the original 48, right? Why is he selling for so cheap? The answer is Ika Gulfe Shamaria. You have to include the what was absorbed by the barrel and what's lost to the sediment. So in other words, when you're doing your calculation, don't say it's 4 out of 48, it's 4 out of 36 that he's profiting. So that's a better rate. So in that case, he's taking too much, right? Because what's 1/6 of 36 is wait a second. 48, you take out the 1/6, then you've got 40. And if you profit 40, that's 10%, which is less than a 6, no?
What?
1 second. So the Gemara appears to be assuming that the barrel itself. Oh yeah, okay. It's not. I'm sorry. There's not. It's not what's absorbed. The Gemara is saying that you have to include in his cost the cost of the barrel and the cost of the leaves, right? That you're paying for those, right? That when you pay wholesale, you're paying for those. And you get to keep those, right? He's bought the barrel. There's no law that you have to return the barrel to the owner, to the wholesaler. So not only does he get the 4 kuz of profit, but he also gets the barrel, and the leaves which are left over, which have some value too. The Gemara says, well, then maybe he's making too much money. Or says ikatircha udumei barzanaisa. Yeah, well, it's not just profit. It's also, he's got to work. He's got to schlep things. He's got to, maintain the store. He's got to measure things out. That can be considered separate just from the trading, right? The markup from wholesale to retail doesn't include the time that you have to spend dealing with customers or whatever.
You say there were 36. If you say 36 and 1/6 of that's exactly 6, right? And we were saying 4. We were saying he kept 4, but now he's keeping 6 out of 1/6
right,
of 36.
He's keeping 4. He's keeping 4, plus he's keeping the barrel. The barrel has value too. So the Gemara says, well, if you figure it that way, then maybe he's taking too much. And the Gemara answers,
he's entitled to 6, isn't he? If he takes 1/6 of 36, is that what we were saying before?
Yeah, exactly.
So then he's entitled to 6, and he's only taking 4.
But he's taking 4, plus he's taking the barrel. The barrel also has value.
We don't know how much the barrel is worth.
Right, but the Gemara is assuming that maybe that takes him beyond. He's making more than the 6. The Gemara says he may be making more than the 6, but it's not just the markup. It's also his labor costs, and also Barzanaisa. He might have to hire somebody to Barzanaisa is apparently a tapper, right? Somebody who's like an expert in working with barrels. So he has costs, right? It's not just profit what he's taking. He also has to cover his costs, and that's how he gets below the 1/6 markup.
This commentary here says it's exactly 1/6. When you take into account his work is it says that including all that, and it makes it exactly 1/6.
Right. Well, that's what Morris assuming, so that it doesn't deal with he's taking too much or too little. Right. So from the we're going to assume that he was taking the exact right amount of markup, and in order to have that come out, right, we're saying, yeah, that's how it worked out. The 4 kuz of product plus the barrel minus the labor costs came out exactly to the right amount of markup. Okay, so the Mishnah moved on to shemen oil. Imhaya shemen mezukak. If it was pure refined oil, so there's no sediment. So don't deduct the 1.5% for sediment. The Gemara says, but there must be some absorption, right? Which is so must be commenting on the second part, that if it were old barrels that have already absorbed stuff, Gemara says, but barrels, even old barrels, are going to absorb something, so don't completely cancel out the shrinkage from absorption. We're talking about barrels that are so well sealed or lined on the inside that they're completely there's no additional absorption in old barrels. You don't have to answer that. The tone that there is a point where, like, the barrels are really old, or they've been used that many times. There's a certain point where they're really not going to absorb anymore, and so you can completely discount the possibility that there was any shrinkage lost to absorption. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah, he applies this also to a merchant. as we said in the Mishnah, that if I buy 100 liters and I take delivery over the year, I'm going to accept some shrinkage due to absorption and due to sediment. Amar Abai says Kishatzim Salomar, if you like examine this a little further. But Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Mutar La'arev Shmarim. You can if you're you can mix the sediment back into the oil. So in other words, let's say I come and buy oil, but I'm not asking for refined oil. I just want regular oil, and you have refined oil, right? Or you take off the top. You can mix in when you dole it out to me. You can mix in shmarim. You can mix in the sediment, right? Because that's what I bought. But according to the rabbis who disagree with Rabbi Yehuda, also are shmarim. You should not be allowed to do that because they didn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda. That if I buy 100 liters, they say you have to give me 100 liters, right? So you can't mix in. I guess they're assuming that when I agree to buy oil from you, I'm expecting refined. I'm expecting oil without the sediment. So Abai explains further. According to Rabbi Yehuda, mutal shmarim behind the Talmud, the Mekabel. This is the reason for the buyer, the Amarle, because the seller could say, if I wanted to mix in sediment, I could have done it. So if I'm giving you without the sediment, take 1.5% less, right? And so Gemara says, okay, fine. So like you gave me less oil. I'm saying you should have given me the sediment itself as well. Like you can't just say I could have given you the sediment, but I didn't. You should have given me the sediment. I could have sold that. Like I could have there's some value in that too. So Hashta, now that you've sold me refined oil, my avile, what should I do? It's not like I can't. I could have turned around and sold the whole package to somebody else, right? With the sediment, but I can't sell just sediment. Nobody's going to buy that. So more answers. Yeah. So that's the explanation. So sorry, no. So this is an objection to Rabbi Yehuda, right? It's like. Don't tell me that I already gave you 98.5 liters because I could have given you sediment within it and given you 100 liters, but you gave me what you gave me. Now you're only going to give me sediment to make it up. Like that's no good for me. I can't do anything with that. So your answer is we're talking about somebody who's not going to resell, right? The nichale betzila. We're assuming that I'd rather have the 98.5 liters of refined oil rather than 100 liters of unrefined because it saves me the trouble of having to filter it myself when I get home. But we're not talking about where I'm planning to resell it, where that objection would have been a good objection. Obviously, since you didn't mix the sediment in achule. Like you're saying, I could have given you unrefined oil 100 liters, but you didn't. I didn't ask for that. I said, give me my oil. You gave me 98.5 liters of refined oil. It was very nice of you, but you still owe me a liter and a half of oil. So the answer is Rabbi Yehuda Tameh delay mechila. He doesn't assume that by accepting the 1.5% less that I've given up my rights to it. To the extra 1.5%. It's okay. I'll take what you're giving me now, but you still owe me. It's none. Where do we get that from? Machalos hatzemed. If you sold a yoke to somebody, lo machalos habakar, but not the ox. Machalos habakar. Oh yeah. So lo machalos habakar. If by selling the yoke, I'm not necessarily including. We're not assuming that I'm including the ox that's attached to the yoke. Machalos habakar, and if you sell the ox, well, machalos hatzemed, it's not necessarily including the yoke. You go look at the price, right? Kesad, how does that work? Amarlo macharli simdecha b'masayim zuz. Sell me your yoke for 200 zuz. That's way overpaying. Obviously, you mean the yoke with the oxen, right? But the rabbis say no. people will pay crazy prices for whatever reason. If the deal only mentioned the yoke, then it's only the yoke, even if you paid a large amount. I know what you're going to ask, Robert. Or Ken, you're going to say, but
What's the
isn't that
hava meaning?
overcharging?
No, but I was going to say, what's the hava meaning? To think that if you set a price for the yoke or for the or for the ox or whatever, what's the hava meaning? To think that the other object is also included.
Well, the hava mean is that if the price, this is the argument, if the price is so high that it will only make sense if it included the other object, right? That it's a package deal, then we assume that's the case. But the other view is no. It's maybe this is just a vehicle for me to give you more money, right? Like I want to give you a gift, so I'm but you're not going to accept a gift from me, so I'm going to overpay for something.
And well, then you could say, how is he allowed to overcharge like this? I mean,
That's what I thought you were going to ask. So
yeah.
then, yeah, maybe that's not considered overcharging. Maybe it's understood that there's a gift embedded in the purchase price. Okay, it's a little difficult, but that's what I'll assume. Now, with divrei chachamim, according to the rabbis, asur la'arev shmarim. You can't mix the sediment back into the oil. That's the reason, like that the buyer doesn't have to accept that reduction, right? Because you could say if you wanted to mix it, I wouldn't. You would you have been allowed to do so? No. Hashaname. So now that you didn't mix it in lomakablin, I'm not accepting any reduction, any shrinkage. I don't know if Papa Labayes or if Papa says Adrabah. You should say the opposite. Maybe you could say that according to the rabbis, it's permitted to mix for the merchant to mix in shemarim, the sediment, into the amount that he's doling out to you. And why doesn't the buyer have to accept it? Since you didn't mix it in, you gave up your right to do so. Like, why are you saying that you why are you saying that you get the benefit? I should get the benefit, right? You could have mixed in shmarim, but you didn't. Okay, that's very nice of you, but that doesn't mean you can deduct from the amount that I bought from you. Don't deduct the 1.5%. And Lediva Rabbi Yehuda, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, also shmarim. Maybe it's forbidden to mix in the shmarim. But this is why he would say that you have to accept it. If I wanted to mix in the sediment, I wouldn't have been allowed to. And now you're telling me you're not accepting like the lesser amount. Zavon zaben tagra ikre. This is like an idiom or an expression saying like buy and sell at the same price. And like, are you going to make any money? Like, are you going to make a living that way? Right. Okay. So now we're going to move on to something a little bit different than the sediment, which is stuff that collects on the surface, like a scum that collects on the surface. So Tana, we have a brisa, lifkatim. The same rule applies to both the buyer and seller when it comes to the scum. My lifkatim. What do you mean? What is that law? Sorry, it's not buyer and seller. I'm sorry. It's whether it's a purchase transaction or a shomer transaction. It's the same rule. So what is that rule? If the rule is that neither the buyer nor the depositor has to accept the scum as part of the measure of the return, so maybe the seller or the shomer could say, like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, this is from your oil, right? You gave me a barrel of oil. Now it's got the scum on it. Like, I shouldn't be held responsible for that. What am I going to do with the scum? I'm just giving it back to you as it was. Ella, so we have to explain that Mekabel Pekatim, Lokach Nami Mekabel Pekatim. Maybe it's the other way around. It's like they both have to accept the return of this oil with the scum on top. Umi Mekabel Lokach Pekatim, but does the buyer have to accept that? Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Lo Amru Shemen Achur Elo L'Mocher Bilbad. Rabbi Yehuda says when there's a loss for oil that becomes cloudy, which apparently is the same thing as the scum we're talking about, that loss accrues to the seller, not the buyer. Below pekatim, because when the buyer makes this deal, he's saying, "I'll accept the 1.5% reduction." But you can't give, but part of that is the scum that I don't want that back. That's part of the 1.5% deduction you're going to give me. So that would indicate that the buyer yeah, so that would indicate that you don't deduct for the pekatim, so for the scum. So what is our brisa talking about? Our answer is Lakasha Hadiyavle Zuzi Betishrei, Bekashakil Mine Benisan Kimida de Tishrei. We're talking about when you're the buyer, the case of the buyer is when you're accepting it much later, right? In a different season. So Hadiyavle, so in that case, you accept that there's going to be scum, right? That over the 6 months, the oil will kind of separate, or whatever process it is that produces this layer on the top. But the brisa, which says that you can ignore the scum, is when you pay for it in Nisan, and then you come next week. It isn't a different season. So then, since in Nisan you can assume that we're talking about refined oil, then the purchase is assumed to be only refined oil, and so you need to get 100 liters of refined oil.
Why should this make a difference here with scum? Earlier we talked about sediment. There may be some value to sediment, but scum, there's no value. So the seller is obligated to fulfill the contract regardless of when it is. He should take responsibility to ensure there's no scum on this.
Right, unless you say that the assumption was, or that either explicit or explicit, either implicit or explicit, the assumption is that when I pay you for 100 liters, I know that I'm only going to get 98.5 because there's going to be scum. So one brisa says that loss accrues to the seller because in the case where I'm just going to come back next week and get it, then there's no assumption that there's going to be any shrinkage, right? But if the idea is that I'm going to come and get it over the next 6 months or 6 months from now, then the assumption is that there is going to be shrinkage, and so the initial deal was that is assumed to have been 100 liters less the shrinkage.
Oh, so the scum is considered shrinkage then. It's an
Yeah.
example of shrinkage.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so we'll stop here for today and pick up from this Mishnah tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Have a good day.